Welcome to Practical Ideas for Growth. I'm Sarah Dobeck, and today I am joined by Buol Ruszczyk. Bonnie, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited for you to join me today. I'm even more excited to talk about how we should be incorporating DEI into marketing and business development efforts. It's been around for a while, right? But it definitely has resurfaced in the last 18 months and really is a huge focus for firms. And so I'm super excited to dig into this topic. It's not something that I think any of us will ever feel like we know or are doing well, but I think it's something that sometimes we're afraid to talk about. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
Well, thanks. I am happy to be here. And I agree. There are a lot of uncomfortable conversations around this topic, but they're conversations that need to be had. And you get through that and you move forward in little steps, one little step at a time.
Absolutely. And you've been spending a lot of time in this space over the last year. And in fact, I think you've gotten certified. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. I did. I decided last summer, this is a topic that's always been important to me. But last summer, I'm like, you know what? I kind of need to put my money in my mouth where my mouth is, and decided to research programs and decided to go through the Cornell Diversity and Inclusion Certification Program and finish that early November of last year. So it was a fantastic program. It was more work than I thought it would be, but it was well worth it.
Yeah, and I love that. I think there's so much to learn about this, and I love that there are some of these training programs that are coming up. And I think that most people I meet have really good intentions, especially in business. But I know there's always a question about why is this important to embrace? Because I think some firms think that they're doing just fine with it, and do we really need to make DEI a big deal? But what do you think about that, Bonnie? Why should a firm embrace some of the DEI initiatives?
There are a lot of reasons, frankly. And I actually have a few statistics here that I am going to read, and then I'll shut that down. But there's better financial performance, which when we're talking to accounting firms, that's certainly something that is top of mind. But ethnically diverse companies are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry median, so above their competitors. Gender diverse companies are 15% more likely to outperform their competitors, and companies with diverse leadership reported 19% higher revenues. So, I mean, just from a purely financial perspective, it's something that's important. It also, attracts talent. 67% of job seekers view a diverse workforce as an important factor when they're looking at companies and where they want to work and where they want to stay when they get there. Greater creativity, innovation, and growth. Diverse firms are 70% likelier to capture a new market. So entering a new industry niche, adding a new service, any of that, diverse firms perform much better than others. And 45% they're 45% more likely to report increased market share year over year. Two more things. Increases employee engagement. 83% of millennials report that being actively engaged when they believe their organizations fosters an inclusive workplace culture. And this one I find fascinating, and I think it's one of the most important ones too, is it supports powerful decision-making. Teams that are inclusive just make better decisions 87% of the time, in large part because they're getting people with different perspectives and different experience and information that are contributing to the decision-making. So there are many, many reasons, but, those are just a few of them, and, the numbers attached to them.
And I think that's super powerful. One of the things that you touched on sort of anecdotally that I always bring up in conversation is I think that there's this perception still, and not intentional perception, it's just where most firms have leaned, that diversity equals gender or it equals race. And while those are two elements of diversity of thought, in my opinion, is the most important. Now, you can get to that diversity of thought because you're bringing in people with different backgrounds and different perspectives to the table, but it doesn't always have to be represented. right? I'm sure you've been in those some conversations that I've had, where they say, oh gosh, we've got some people retiring and all of a sudden we're not going to have as many women leaders at the top. And while I'm glad that firms are conscious about that, I've also seen the other side of it, in all walks of life. I'm on a board, or a volunteer committee, and I won't say for who because I don't want to call them out, but there was a conversation about trying to add diversity, but forcing women to be in a particular program. And so I looked at that and I'm like, that's not right either, right? We can't force diversity. We can't force inclusion, but we can foster that environment. And I think that some of that starts with our own awareness. And I know that you, part of your training, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, has been around unconscious bias. And to me, that's a really fascinating area that I feel like I can personally evolve with. So for those that maybe don't know what that is, can you tell us a little bit more about unconscious bias, Bonnie?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's also one of the areas that fascinates me the most, in part because, while nobody really wants to think that they, have any ill will or harbor any negative feelings toward anybody else, we are just innately have biases that we are not aware of. Unconscious bias lives in the same part of your brain, the amygdala, that is fight or flight. So you don't think about, you're on a nice hike down down through the woods and you see, a snake, you don't necessarily think, oh, there is a snake. I wonder what kind of snake. You just haul ass out of there. So, really, it's the same kind of reaction that we have, and we don't even realize that we're having it. And it goes back to how, where we were raised, who were we exposed to, who did we see in leadership positions? One of the questions that our professor asked us was, when was the first time you had a teacher of color or a doctor that was not white and male? Because that's how, when somebody is telling a story and the assumption is the doctor is male, that's where all that comes from. It's just where, what we were raised with. And it's hard to overcome that sort of thing. And we have to force ourselves to be aware of how we're reacting to certain people or certain situations and kind of look inside and say, okay, why do I feel this way? And is this really how I should be reacting to this situation? And, make small changes in ourselves to, be more aware of that sort of thing and be fair to everybody that we meet along our journey through life, before really any change is going to happen. But it is hard. It is absolutely hard.
It is. And it's so important for that awareness, because I think that's usually where we see not the bad intention. I don't, like I said, I don't feel like I meet a lot of people in our work, and we work in similar markets that intentionally are doing this. It's that piece that they don't even realize is affecting them. And half of evolution is self-awareness and just being conscious of what we're doing and trying, right? We're not going to be perfect at it all the time.
Well, and there's even small things you can do. There's a number of studies out there that show that in hiring situations, to remove the name and often the college from resumes as you're looking at them. And, so you're really just looking at experience and, the factors that really impact how that person is going to perform the job, as opposed to what is their name, where are they from?
Mm-hmm.
And that has had huge impact on the people that are given an opportunity to interview that may not have had that same opportunity without that step.
Absolutely.
Do.
I love that idea of being able to remove some of those items and at least get people in the door. It's great. I think that that's a great idea. Now, we both work in the marketing space, right? And I feel like that this is something that is becoming more and more aware. There's been lots of things going on and public visibility. We sit right in the middle of Pride Month right now. And so I don't think I really planned this conversation and that together, but it just happens that that's the way that it is. But marketers are getting a lot more involved in this, and there's a few ways that it's showing up. One, and I think it's been this way in the legal profession for quite a while, but it's definitely hitting the accounting profession a lot more now that companies are asking, right, about this in the proposal process. And what are some things that firms can think about to as they're in that process and be able to talk about that helps if they are truly a diverse firm that has a strong DEI initiative? What are some things that aren't going to come off as ingenuine, because we have to be very careful that this is truthful and genuine, but we also don't want to market diversity. We've seen those ads that don't represent the firm, but that hit that DEI angle, and it feels very obvious. And I don't think that usually generally goes very well. But I do think there's some things that can be valuable in being able to differentiate your firm and support the firm's DEI initiatives publicly.
Yeah. And I think, showing, if you are truly a diverse firm, featuring people from various positions within the firm on your website and video interviews of why do you like to work here? What is important? Why did you choose this as a workplace? Where you're really kind of killing multiple birds with one stone. Yes, you're showing that you have a diverse team, but you're also able to talk about the culture and what it is that employees like about working there, in addition to what partners like. So I think that can be a really powerful thing. I agree with you that, marketing materials and websites that are chock full of, the perfectly diverse group of stock people, when the firm itself in no way resembles that, is completely disingenuous and actually in some ways bordering on dishonest. And, I think that tends to backfire. But, making sure that, what you mentioned RFPs too, having, statements put together, having all of your information together so you can include that in your RFPs. But I think honestly, it's not about like having huge statements that we're a diverse team. It's just, showing, featuring your employees, talking about your culture, showing what's important, even showcasing like employee events and, volunteer kind of things, that where they see the culture without being beaten over the head with the idea that, we're a diverse team.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like too, the part of marketing's role, and one of the angles we take with a lot of our clients is, let's get our internal organization aligned first, and let's make a commitment. Let's figure out what our commitment is and how important that is to our organization. And I know that our teams have spent a lot of times helping craft the internal message around the importance of that. How does that translate to our values? How does that translate to work, to recruiting? It's usually where it starts, but what are we doing to also help empower our people to be more diverse? And training and unconscious bias is one of the first places that we typically suggest that they start. I'm sure there's a lot more, and I'm definitely not the expert in this area, but just having the conversations, I think, begins to open people up.
Well, and I would say what a lot more focus tends to be put on the diverse side of things and not often as much on the inclusive side of things.
Yes.
And that, I think, I've had many conversations with firms that they're like, we have, our recruiting class was, very racially diverse, but they didn't stay 2 years later. And I'm like, well, that's probably where the inclusion part of it came in. These young people want to see a path to, if not partnership, at least a path to growth. They want to feel like they have equal opportunity to speak and present their ideas in meetings as, their counterparts. And, that's where in some cases you almost need to focus on that part, at least at the same time, if not first, to make sure that you're giving people an opportunity to feel like they belong and feel like they can be themselves, without having to assimilate into the environment completely, but yet be appreciated for who they are and what they bring to the table. And if they're not, they're going to go somewhere else and where they do feel that way.
Oh, I am in such violent agreement with you on that. And that inclusion is so important. We're a very transparent organization, and we tell our firms that we lean that way. And I can't tell you how many firms still aren't sharing that vision, right? Or pieces of what's going on in the firm. And it's still sort of a closed club. And I don't care whether it is a whole bunch of white males and a few women, or all women in a completely diverse culture. That inclusion piece is a make or break to where the firm is going. And even client interaction, right? We still come across firms that are not putting their people in front of their clients, and not everybody should be in front of a client, but I think when you give people the opportunity to shadow and to see some of those and to interact, they more times than not, they surprise you. And that small bit of inclusion can help tie them into their purpose and wanting to be wherever they're at, whatever organization they're in.
Yeah.
Well, Bonnie, we've got about a minute left. Any final thoughts for our audience today? This is such a big topic, and I'm sure we could sit in hours. We've had a lot of conversations already about this, but any final thoughts that you'd like to leave people with?
I think the biggest thing for firms to think about is this is not a switch you flip, and to think this is a culture change, and all culture change takes time. You're not going to turn around the freighter in a day. So let's, think about very small things you can do, start doing lunch and learns, or create a committee that just kind of looks at things, survey your people. And I really recommend doing that with an outside resource, whatever that resource is, so that people feel like they can be really honest and point out things where they see opportunity to grow and change. So just small steps will start making it, allowing the firm to move in a more inclusive and diverse environment, to becoming a more inclusive and diverse environment. And then, you'll be surprised at how small changes can make a really big impact on your bottom line, your decision making, and everything else.
Yeah, we say that all the time. And the other thing I would add to that probably is it's that small changes person by person.
Yes.
We see this all the time in change. You're not going to change every person in that organization. Just like not everybody's going to be a marketer. And so work with the people that are there, work with the people that are willing, and start with that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This is a great conversation. And like I said, I wish we could keep going with it, but I really appreciate you sharing some of your experience and thoughts in this area.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to talk about this anytime you want to.
All right. Thanks, everyone.